There's a very specific kind of frustration that people are feeling right now, and it's hard to explain. It's not regret, it's not panic, it's not even confusion in the usual sense. It's quieter than that. You walk into a grocery store, pick up a few basic things: milk, eggs, bread, maybe some vegetables, and when you reach the checkout, there's a small pause. Not because you can't pay, but because something doesn't feel right. You've bought these same things before, lived this same life before. Nothing dramatically changed. And yet the number on the screen feels off. Not shocking, not devastating, just wrong. And almost automatically, your brain fills in the answer it has been trained to give: inflation. But if it were just inflation, it wouldn't feel like this. Because this doesn't feel like prices simply went up. It feels like something deeper shifted, and you're only now starting to feel the weight of it. To understand what's happening, you have to separate two things that most people instinctively combine: the numbers and the experience. On paper, the explanation is straightforward. Prices have increased. That's measurable. Economists can chart it. News channels can report it. But what people are reacting to right now isn't just higher prices. It's the feeling that their money behaves differently, that it stretches less, that it disappears faster. That something which once felt manageable now feels tight, even when their lifestyle hasn't dramatically changed. And this is where things begin to diverge from the simple inflation narrative. Because historically, when prices increased, there was still a sense of forward motion. Income would eventually adjust, opportunities would expand. Life, despite getting more expensive, still felt like it was progressing. But now, that sense of progress feels interrupted. People are earning more than they did a few years ago, and yet they feel like they have less room than before. Not less money, less margin, less flexibility, less breathing space. And when those three things shrink at the same time, it creates a constant, low-level pressure that follows you everywhere, when you spend, when you save, even when you think about the future. What makes this situation difficult to understand is that it didn't arrive suddenly. There was no single moment where everything changed. Instead, it was a series of small shifts. Individually, they seemed manageable, almost unnoticeable, but together, they compounded into something much bigger. And one of the most important of those shifts happened far away from your daily life, in a place most people never look. Money feels simple when you use it. You earn it, you spend it, you save it. But beneath that simplicity is a system, one that controls how much money exists, how it moves, and who it reaches first. Over the past several years, that system changed in a very fundamental way. A large amount of money was introduced into the economy, not slowly, not gradually, but rapidly. Now, at a surface level, this sounds like a good thing. More money in the system should mean more activity, more growth, more opportunity. But money doesn't behave that simply, because when more money enters a system, its value doesn't stay the same. Each unit begins to represent slightly less purchasing power. That's the basic idea behind inflation, but this is where the explanation usually stops, and where the real story actually begins. Because the new money didn't spread evenly. It didn't arrive in everyone's hands at the same time. Instead, it flowed through layers. It entered financial institutions, markets, assets, and only later did it begin to affect everyday prices. This created a lag, a delay between when prices started rising and when people actually felt an increase in their income. So what you experienced wasn't just inflation, you experienced rising costs first and adjustments later. And that gap between when prices move and when your income catches up is where the pressure builds. Now bring this back to your daily life. Not all expenses behave the same way. Some are flexible. You can delay them, reduce them, avoid them entirely. But others, you can't escape. Housing, food, healthcare, transportation, these are not optional categories, they are foundational. And right now, these are the very areas where costs have increased the most, which creates a very specific kind of problem. Because when discretionary spending becomes expensive, you adjust. You cut back on dining out, delay purchases, cancel subscriptions. But when essential spending becomes expensive, you don't have that luxury. You absorb it, quietly, reluctantly, but consistently. And this is where the pressure starts to feel personal. Because your expenses are no longer something you actively control, they become something you have to respond to. And when a large portion of your income is already committed to things you can't easily change, your financial flexibility begins to disappear. Flexibility is one of the most underrated aspects of financial well-being. It's what allows you to adapt, to make choices, to recover from mistakes, to take opportunities. When flexibility is high, Even unexpected costs feel manageable. When flexibility is low, even small increases feel overwhelming. And what's happening right now is not just that costs are rising, it's that flexibility is shrinking at the same time, which makes every increase feel heavier than it actually is. At the same time, something else has been quietly building in the background, a layer of expenses that don't feel significant on their own, but become powerful when combined. Subscriptions, convenience services, small recurring payments. Individually, they seem harmless, a few dollars here, a small monthly fee there, but over time, they become permanent parts of your financial structure. You stop evaluating them, stop questioning them. They simply become part of normal life. And this creates what can be called cost layering, where multiple small expenses stack on top of larger fixed costs, until your financial system becomes dense, heavy, difficult to adjust, and once again, flexibility decreases. Even with all of this, there's still one more layer to understand. Because what you're experiencing isn't just economic, it's psychological. Your brain doesn't process price increases neutrally. It experiences them as loss. Every time something costs more than it used to, it creates a small sense of something being taken away, and this feeling accumulates, because losses feel stronger than gains. So even if your income increases slightly, it doesn't offset the emotional weight of rising costs. This creates a situation where logically things might be balanced, but emotionally they feel worse, and over time that feeling becomes your reality. At this point, a natural question comes up. Will things go back to normal? Will prices drop? And the uncomfortable truth is, they usually don't. Prices don't behave symmetrically, they rise quickly, and stabilize slowly, but they rarely reverse in a meaningful way. This is because once businesses adjust pricing, structures, and expectations, there's very little incentive to bring them down again. So instead of reversing, the system resets at a higher level, and over time, that new level becomes the baseline. This is the moment where most people feel stuck, because if everything is getting more expensive and prices aren't going back, what are you supposed to do? And this is where the perspective needs to shift, because the answer isn't about controlling the system, it's about understanding how to operate within it. The first shift is subtle but powerful. You stop focusing on prices and start focusing on control. You may not be able to change how expensive things are, but you can change how much influence you have over your own system. That begins with awareness, not extreme budgeting, not restriction, but clarity. Understanding where your money goes, what is fixed, what is flexible, and what can be adjusted over time. From there, the goal becomes rebuilding flexibility. Even small amounts of flexibility create disproportionate relief because they restore your ability to choose, to respond, to adapt. The next shift is structural. Instead of relying on constant decision-making, you begin to create systems. Automatic saving, automatic investing, defined spending boundaries. Not to restrict yourself, but to reduce friction. Because when decisions become automatic, consistency becomes easier, and consistency is what allows progress to rebuild slowly even in a difficult environment. Finally, there's a shift in how you think about stability. For a long time, stability meant predictability. One job, one income stream, one path. But in a system that is constantly shifting, stability comes from adaptability, from having multiple ways to generate income, multiple options, multiple paths. Not because you need more complexity, but because flexibility is what replaces uncertainty with control. So if everything feels expensive right now, it's not just inflation. It's a combination of changes in how money flows, in how costs behave, in how your brain processes those changes, and in how your life is structured around them. Once you see all of these layers together, the confusion starts to fade, because what felt random becomes understandable, and once something becomes understandable, it becomes manageable. Not instantly, but gradually, and that's where things begin to change. If this changed the way you see money even slightly, then you're starting to look at it the right way. Subscribe to Drawn to Wealth, because the difference between feeling stuck and building control is understanding what's really happening beneath the surface.